Right now, as you're watching this video, 250,000 American federal employees are not getting paid. The TSA agents screening your bags at the airport, working without a paycheck. The Coast Guard members patrolling American waters, working without a paycheck. FEMA, the agency that shows up when hurricanes, wildfires, and disasters hit your community, crippled. And where is Congress? On vacation, literally on recess, gone, out of Washington, not coming back for a week. The United States government is in a partial shutdown, and the people who are supposed to fix it have left the building. But here's what makes this one different from every shutdown you've seen before. This isn't about the budget. This isn't about the debt ceiling. This isn't about some massive spending bill that nobody can agree on. This shutdown is about one agency, one single department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the reason it's shut down? Because Senate Democrats are demanding sweeping reforms to immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, and they will not fund a single dollar of DHS until they get what they want. They're calling it accountability. Republicans are calling it a hostage situation. And right in the middle of it all, two fatal shootings, a list of 10 demands, and a president who says Democrats are holding Americans safety ransom for political points. Let me show you exactly what's happening, because this story is far bigger than anyone is telling you. To understand this shutdown, you need to go back to the event that set everything in motion. During ICE operations in Minnesota, two people, Alex Pretty and Renee Nicole Good, were fatally shot. The details surrounding these shootings sent shockwaves through the country, and they became the catalyst for what we're seeing right now. Senate Democrats seized on these shootings as proof of what they've been arguing for years, that ICE operates with insufficient oversight, that agents use excessive force, and that communities across America are being terrorized by immigration enforcement operations that have gone too far. Now, regardless of where you stand on immigration, these deaths changed the political landscape overnight. Before the shootings, the DHS funding bill was moving through Congress like any other appropriations measure. House and Senate appropriators had crafted a bill. There was bipartisan support. It was supposed to be routine. After the shootings, everything stopped. Senate Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, drew a hard line. They announced they would not vote to fund the Department of Homeland Security unless Congress included significant reforms to how ICE operates. Not minor tweaks, not a study committee, significant structural reforms. And they put together a list. 10 demands, 10 specific reforms that they say are non-negotiable. Let's go through the key ones because they're at the heart of this entire standoff. First, judicial warrants. Democrats are demanding that ICE agents be required to obtain judicial warrants before conducting enforcement operations. Right now, ICE can issue administrative warrants, which are signed by ICE officials themselves, not judges. Democrats argue this is a fundamental violation of constitutional protections. Republicans counter that requiring judicial warrants for immigration enforcement would effectively cripple ICE's ability to operate. Second, face coverings. This one has become a lightning rod. Democrats want to ban or severely limit ICE agents from wearing face coverings during operations. Schumer himself called masked agents conducting operations in communities secret police. That's an incredibly loaded term. It evokes images of authoritarian regimes, of government forces operating in the shadows. Republicans argue that face coverings are necessary for agent safety, particularly in dangerous operations involving criminal targets. These two demands alone represent a massive gap between the parties. But there are 8 more on the list, and Republicans have described the entire package as a set of red lines, demands so extreme that agreeing to them would fundamentally undermine immigration enforcement in America. So here we are. Democrats won't fund DHS without ICE reforms. Republicans won't accept those reforms. And the government stays shut down. Let's talk about who's actually paying the price for this political standoff, because it's not the senators, it's not the president, it's everyday Americans. The Department of Homeland Security is one of the largest federal agencies in the United States. It employs over 250,000 people. And right now, a significant portion of those employees are either furloughed, meaning they're sitting at home, not working, not getting paid, or they're deemed essential and forced to work without pay. Let's start with the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. These are the people who screen every single passenger and piece of luggage at every commercial airport in America. Every day, TSA agents process roughly 2.5 million passengers. During a shutdown, these agents are classified as essential, which means they have to show up to work, but they don't get paid, not until the shutdown ends and Congress passes the funding. Now imagine you're a TSA agent making around $40,000 to $50,000 a year. You're living paycheck to paycheck like millions of Americans, and suddenly that paycheck stops. But you still have to show up at 4 in the morning, stand on your feet for 8 hours, screen hundreds of passengers, and do it all with a smile. How long before morale collapses? How long before people start calling in sick? How long before the security lines at your airport stretch out the door? We saw this during previous shutdowns. TSA sick calls spiked dramatically. Wait times at major airports ballooned. And the longer the shutdown lasts, the worse it gets. Then there's FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. This is the agency that responds to natural disasters, hurricanes, wildfires, floods, tornadoes. FEMA is the backbone of America's disaster response system. During a shutdown, FEMA's operations are severely curtailed. Non-essential personnel are furloughed. Planning and preparation activities grind to a halt. And here's the terrifying part. We're in the middle of winter. Winter storms, flooding, ice storms, these things don't wait for Congress to come back from vacation. If a major disaster hits right now, FEMA's response capacity is diminished. That's not a political talking point. That's a fact that puts American lives at risk. The Coast Guard is also affected. These men and women patrol American waters, conduct search and rescue operations, interdict drug shipments, and enforce maritime law. During a shutdown, Coast Guard personnel, many of whom serve in dangerous conditions, work without pay. During the 2018-2019 shutdown, which lasted 35 days, Coast Guard families were forced to rely on food banks. Active duty military personnel protecting American shores couldn't pay their rent. That's the reality of a government shutdown. It's not an abstract political concept. It's real people, real families, real consequences. And the cruel irony of this particular shutdown, ICE itself is largely unaffected. Because ICE received additional funding under previously passed legislation, its core enforcement operations are expected to continue. The very agency at the center of this fight keeps operating. It's everyone else who suffers. So let me make sure you understand what's happening here. Democrats are demanding ICE reforms as a condition for funding DHS, but ICE keeps running regardless. The agencies that are actually being hurt, TSA, FEMA, Coast Guard, have nothing to do with the ICE debate. They're collateral damage in a political war. That's not accountability. That's a hostage situation where the hostages have nothing to do with the ransom demand. Now let's get into the political trench warfare, because what's happening behind the scenes is just as important as what's happening on camera. On one side, you have Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the entire Senate Democratic Caucus. They are unified. They are not budging. And they are using some of the most inflammatory language we've heard in a funding fight in years. Schumer stood before cameras and said, quote, "Americans are tired of masked agents conducting warrantless operations in their communities, secret police. They're tired of chaos, secrecy, and zero accountability." Secret police. Think about those words for a moment. The Senate Minority Leader of the United States just compared American federal law enforcement officers to secret police. That's not a casual comment. That's a deliberate framing designed to associate ICE with authoritarian regimes. It's meant to evoke fear, outrage, and moral urgency. And from a political standpoint, it's working. The Democratic caucus is holding together. Not a single Senate Democrat has broken ranks. Schumer has managed to keep every member of his party in line, which in the Senate is no small feat. On the other side, you have the White House and Senate Republicans. The White House has been leading negotiations on behalf of Senate Republicans, and they did offer Democrats a proposal. The details of that proposal haven't been made public, but Democrats rejected it. A senior White House official called this a Democrat-driven shutdown caused by their intransigence and desire to use government funding for services all Americans rely on as a hostage in order to achieve an unrelated political goal. That's strong language from the White House. They're framing this as Democrats holding essential government services hostage, airport security, disaster response, Coast Guard operations, to push through immigration policy changes that have nothing to do with DHS funding. Senate Majority Leader John Thune tried to break the Democratic front. He attempted to peel off moderate Democrats to find a crack in Schumer's wall. It didn't work. Thune himself acknowledged the frustration, saying that reasonable efforts had been overshadowed by the fact that the Democrats don't seem to want to play ball. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not every Democrat is on board with the strategy. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania broke with his party, publicly saying that Democrats put politics over country in this standoff. Fetterman has been increasingly willing to go against his party's leadership on immigration issues, and his dissent highlights a real tension within the Democratic caucus. If Fetterman is saying it publicly, you can bet other Democrats are thinking it privately. The question is whether Schumer can keep his caucus together long enough to extract real concessions, or whether the pressure of 250,000 unpaid federal workers eventually breaks the dam. On the House side, Speaker Mike Johnson has told his members they'll get 48 hours notice to come back if the Senate passes a bill. The House is on recess until February 23rd. Johnson has expressed support for the original DHS funding bill and seems content to let the Senate work this out. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, meanwhile, has echoed Schumer's position. No funding without ICE reforms. So both chambers are locked, both parties are dug in, and Congress is literally not in Washington to do anything about it. Let's cut through the talking points and get to what's really going on here, because this shutdown isn't just about ICE. It's about something much bigger. For Democrats, this is about establishing a precedent. If they can use a government shutdown to force ICE reforms, they've proven that they can leverage funding fights to reshape immigration enforcement, even without controlling the White House or the Senate majority. It's a power play, and the Minnesota shootings gave them the moral ammunition to make it. Think about the timing. The shootings created a public outcry. Democrats channeled that outcry into specific legislative demands, and they chose to make their stand on the one funding bill where DHS, the parent agency of ICE, needed congressional approval. It's not an accident, it's strategy. If Democrats win this fight, if they get even some of their 10 demands, it will fundamentally change how ICE operates. Judicial warrants would slow down enforcement operations dramatically. Restrictions on face coverings would make agents more identifiable and, Democrats argue, more accountable. Taken together, these reforms would represent the most significant constraints on immigration enforcement in a generation. For Republicans and the White House, this is equally high stakes. If they cave to Democratic demands during a shutdown, they're setting a precedent that minority parties can use government shutdowns as leverage to force policy changes. Every future funding fight becomes a potential hostage situation. Every spending bill becomes an opportunity for the opposition to attach unrelated demands. More specifically, Trump cannot afford to appear weak on immigration. It's his signature issue. It's what got him elected twice. If his administration agrees to restrictions on ICE in exchange for DHS funding, his base will see it as a betrayal. The political cost within his own party would be enormous. So both sides have existential reasons to hold firm. Democrats need this win to prove they can still influence policy from the minority. Republicans need this win to prove that shutdowns can't be used as policy weapons. And caught in the middle, 250,000 federal workers who just want to get paid. There's also a deeper constitutional question here that nobody is talking about. Immigration enforcement is an executive branch function. The president, through agencies like ICE, has broad authority to enforce immigration law. What Democrats are demanding, judicial warrants, restrictions on operational tactics, represents a congressional attempt to dictate how the executive branch carries out its enforcement duties. Republicans see this as an overreach. They argue that Congress funds agencies but doesn't get to micromanage operations. Democrats counter that Congress has the power of the purse and can absolutely attach conditions to how taxpayer money is spent. This tension between executive authority and congressional oversight is as old as the republic itself, but it's never been tested quite like this, with a partial shutdown as the battlefield and 250,000 workers as the casualties. So what happens now? When does this end? And how bad can it get? Here's the honest answer. Nobody knows when this ends, and that's the scariest part. Congress is on recess. The Senate isn't scheduled to return until next week at the earliest. The House isn't back until February 23rd. Senate Majority Leader Thune has said lawmakers will get 24 hours notice if a deal is reached. Speaker Johnson has said the House will get 48 hours, but there is no deal. There isn't even a framework for a deal. The White House made a proposal that Democrats rejected. Democrats have a list of 10 demands that Republicans call red lines. The two sides aren't just far apart, they're speaking different languages. The best case scenario, negotiations continue quietly over the recess. Back-channel conversations between the White House and Senate Democratic leadership produce a compromise, maybe some watered-down version of ICE reforms that both sides can claim as a victory. The Senate passes a bill, the House follows within 48 hours, Trump signs it, and the shutdown ends sometime in late February. The worst-case scenario, neither side blinks. The shutdown drags on through February and into March. Federal workers miss multiple paychecks, TSA staffing drops to critical levels, airport delays spike. A natural disaster hits and FEMA can't respond at full capacity. Public anger builds, not at one party, but at the entire system. And here's the wild card that nobody is discussing. What happens if another incident occurs during the shutdown? What if there's another ICE operation that goes wrong? What if there's a confrontation that turns violent? In this charged political environment, any incident involving ICE could either strengthen Democratic demands or harden Republican resistance. Either way, it makes a deal harder, not easier. The financial impact is already mounting. Federal workers who live paycheck to paycheck are facing real hardship. Many will turn to savings, if they have any. Others will rely on credit cards, loans, or emergency assistance. During the 2018-2019 shutdown, food banks across the country reported surges in demand from federal workers. Landlords reported unpaid rent. The financial stress rippled through local economies in every community with a significant federal workforce. And let's not forget the contractors. When the government shuts down, federal contractors, the private companies and individuals who provide services to federal agencies, also stop getting paid. Unlike federal workers, contractors have historically not received back pay after shutdowns. Their income is simply lost. The longer this goes, the more damage it does. Not just to the workers, not just to the agencies, but to public trust in government itself. Every shutdown reinforces the narrative that Washington is broken, that elected officials care more about political victories than about the people they serve, that the system is rigged to benefit the powerful while the average American pays the price. And right now, that narrative is writing itself. Both parties claim to be fighting for the American people. Republicans say they're fighting for border security and law enforcement. Democrats say they're fighting for accountability and civil liberties. But from the perspective of a TSA agent working without pay, or a Coast Guard family wondering how to cover the mortgage, or a FEMA employee watching disaster preparedness grind to a halt, none of those talking points pay the bills. I want to leave you with a question that I think cuts through all the noise. We have a system in which elected officials can go on vacation while 250,000 Americans don't get paid. A system where political leverage is built on the backs of people who have zero say in the outcome. A system where the agency at the center of the fight, ICE, keeps operating with full funding while everyone else in the department gets punished. Does that make sense to anyone? This isn't a Republican problem or a Democrat problem. This is a structural problem. The fact that government shutdowns are even possible, the fact that Congress can simply fail to fund essential services and walk away, is a failure of the system itself. Other democracies don't work this way. In most parliamentary systems, a failure to pass a budget triggers new elections, not a shutdown. The people in charge are held accountable immediately. In America, the people in charge go on recess, and the workers bear the cost. So here's what I want you to think about. Forget the party labels for a minute. Forget whether you're pro-ICE or anti-ICE. Forget whether you think Schumer is a hero or a villain. Ask yourself this: should 250,000 Americans ever be used as bargaining chips in a political negotiation? Should TSA agents, Coast Guard members, and FEMA employees ever work without pay because politicians can't agree on something that has nothing to do with their jobs? Should Congress be allowed to leave town while the government is shut down? These are the questions that matter. And until we start demanding answers, this will keep happening. Different year, different issue, same result, same people paying the price. The shutdown continues, Congress is on vacation, and 250,000 Americans are waiting. If this video helped you understand what's really going on, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want to stay informed on this story as it develops, and drop a comment. Who do you think is responsible for this shutdown? Democrats, Republicans, both? I want to hear your take. I'll see you in the next one.